I used to think abandonment would feel dramatic, something loud, public, but when it finally happened, it sounded like an airport printer. A soft, mechanical noise behind the counter while the agent stared at her screen too long. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Your ticket was canceled this morning." At first, I smiled. Well, not because it was funny, because my family was incapable of planning anything correctly unless I did it for them. "There must be a mistake," I told her. "The reservation is under my mother's account." The agent hesitated. Then she turned the monitor slightly away from me, the way people do when they already know something painful. It was canceled intentionally around us. People kept moving, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, someone arguing about overhead luggage nearby. I stood there holding my passport while my phone buzzed in my hand. Family group chat, photos from the executive lounge, my younger sister holding a glass of champagne with the caption, finally starting the wedding week, posted 18 minutes earlier. I looked toward the gate windows. Their plane was already backing away. No one had called me. No one had texted, not even my father. The strangest part was that I wasn't shocked immediately, just tired. There's a specific exhaustion that comes from being useful but unloved. I'd lived there for years without admitting it. In my family, my sister Elena was the event, the center, the fragile thing everyone protected. I was the infrastructure. When our father's health started declining 5 years earlier, I stepped into the family business quietly because someone had to. Payroll compliance filings, vendor disputes, licensing renewals, banking documentation, the invisible machinery that kept money moving. At holidays, people praised Elena for bringing light into rooms. Meanwhile, I was asked if I'd remember to renew the liability coverage. I handled crises so consistently that everyone stopped seeing them as crisis or seeing me at all. At the airport, I called my mother once, straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Then finally, a message from my brother. "Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Mom thought it would reduce tension if you stayed home. Reduce tension." I actually laughed then, quietly enough that the gate agent glanced at me with concern. The wedding was in Lisbon, a 7-day celebration none of them could truly afford, but appearances mattered to my family more than stability ever had. I took a taxi home from the airport, still carrying the dress I'd never wear. Inside my apartment, everything was silent except for the hum of my refrigerator and the sound of my phone vibrating endlessly across the counter. Not apologies, mostly instructions, questions about account passwords, vendor confirmations, transfer schedules, the wedding resort needed, final, payment clearance within 12 hours because international limits had flagged one of the transactions. Normally, I handled that. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening my laptop. What happened next wasn't revenge. People always want these stories to become revenge because it makes them easier to understand. But systems don't care about emotions. I was the authorized compliance officer on 3 business entities. After my father's stroke, my signature approved overseas transfers. My authentication tokens handled payroll, release, timing. Half the vendor accounts routed through security verification attached to my device. For years, I'd warned them not to centralize everything through one person. Nobody listened because solving problems quietly makes people think the problems solve themselves. At 11:14 p.m., I sent one text to the family group chat. "You should be ready for what happens next." Then I disabled my authorization access. Not permanently, not maliciously, properly, according to procedure. At 4 a.m., their plane landed. At 4:07, my brother called 6 times. At 4:12, Elena sent her first message that wasn't about herself in maybe 10 years. "What did you do?" By morning, the consequences had started unfolding exactly the way compliance systems are designed to unfold. Business accounts temporarily froze pending identity reification. International transfers paused. The resort informed them payment confirmation had failed. Their wedding coordinator apparently started panicking in the hotel lobby because multiple reservations remain incomplete. I imagined my family standing there in expensive clothes, staring at their phones while automated notices arrived one after another, not because I enjoyed it, because for the first time in my life, they were experiencing what it felt like when my absence had weight. Around noon, my father finally called, not yelling, just tired. I answered because I knew his breathing pattern before he spoke. In the background, I could hear arguing, my mother crying, Elena demanding someone fix this. My father stayed quiet for several seconds. Then he asked very softly, "Why didn't you tell us things depended on you this much?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out my apartment window at the traffic below. "I tried," I said. Silence. Every time I explained what I handled, I continued. Someone changed the subject. He didn't defend himself. That hurt more, somehow. The wedding still happened 3 days later. Smaller than planned, delayed, awkward around the edges. Some vendors refused extensions. Some didn't. My mother didn't speak to me for nearly 2 months afterward. Elena sent one long message about family betrayal that somehow never mentioned the airport. Only my father apologized directly, though even his apology sounded incomplete, like a man discovering too late that dependence and love are not the same thing. Weeks later, I sat alone in a conference room with external auditors reviewing restructuring documents while rain pressed softly against the windows. Everything felt strangely calm. The business survived. The family technically survived too, but afterward, they spoke to me differently, carefully, as if they'd finally understood something dangerous about me. Not that I could destroy everything that I always could have, and chose not.